The orc warrior's hand moved instinctively to the hilt of her blade when she heard footsteps approaching through the darkened forest. But the figure that stumbled into her camp was no threat at all. Just a human man bleeding from a wound across his ribs and gasping for breath like he had been running for miles. She should have killed him or sent him away, but something about the desperate fear in his eyes mixed with an odd sort of determination made her hesitate long enough for him to collapse at the edge of her fire. "Please," he managed to say before consciousness left him entirely. Kharza stood over the fallen human for a long moment, her massive frame casting shadows that danced across his pale skin in the firelight. She was a veteran of 3 border wars, decorated by her clan for valor and ruthlessness in equal measure, and she had killed more humans than she cared to count. This one would die without help, and perhaps that was what he deserved, but her hand moved to check his pulse anyway, finding it weak but steady beneath her calloused fingertips. Against every instinct she had developed over 30 years of warfare and survival, she dragged him closer to the fire and began to assess his injuries. The wound across his ribs was deep but clean, likely from a blade rather than claws or teeth. Someone had been hunting him with intent to kill. She pulled supplies from her pack and set to work cleaning and binding the wound, her movements efficient and practiced despite the strange reluctance she felt about the entire situation. He woke near dawn, his eyes snapping open with the sudden alertness of someone accustomed to danger. Those eyes were a startling shade of blue-green, like deep water in summer, and they fixed on her face with an expression she could not quite read. Fear, certainly, but also something else. Recognition, perhaps, or resignation. "You are awake," she said in the common tongue, her accent thick but her words clear. "You should not be with the amount of blood you lost. You helped me." His voice was rough with pain and disbelief. "I am questioning that decision." She turned away to tend the fire, uncomfortable with the gratitude in his expression. "What were you running from, bounty hunters?" He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it, his face going white with pain. "I saw something I was not supposed to see. Now there is a price on my head." "What did you see?" He studied her for a long moment as if weighing whether to trust her. "A massacre. The border garrison wiped out an orc settlement. Women, children, elders, everyone. They are calling it a military victory, but I was there. I saw what they did." Kharza felt her jaw tighten, her small tusks pressing against her lower lip. "And you spoke of this." I tried to report it. "Instead, they declared me a deserter and a traitor." He managed a bitter smile. "Apparently the truth is worth less than a convenient lie." She wanted to dismiss his story, to assume he was simply trying to gain her sympathy, but the wounds on his body told a story of their own. These were not the injuries of a criminal fleeing justice. These were the marks of someone who had been hunted by trained soldiers who wanted him dead before he could speak further. "What is your name, human?" Nathan Xerxes. He met her eyes without flinching, despite the obvious pain he was in. "Thank you for not killing me. The day is not over yet." But there was no real threat in her words, and they both knew it. She handed him a water skin. "Drink. You need to regain strength before you can move. And then you leave. I have no desire to be caught harboring a fugitive." But Nathan did not leave that day, or the next, because infection set into his wound despite her careful cleaning. And he spent 3 days burning with fever while she forced water and medicine down his throat, and wondered why she did not simply walk away. She had her own reasons for being in these woods, her own exile to endure. She did not need the complication of a dying human in her camp. Yet when the fever finally broke and he opened his eyes to find her sitting beside him, carving a piece of wood with her knife, the relief she felt was undeniable. "Still alive," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Unfortunately for both of us. She did not look up from her carving. You talk in your sleep. What did I say? Names, apologies, nothing coherent. She finally met his eyes. You carry much guilt, Nathan Xerxes. I could not save them. I could only witness and run. Running kept you alive to tell the truth. That is not cowardice. He looked surprised by her words, and perhaps she was surprised herself. She was not accustomed to offering comfort to humans, to seeing them as anything other than the enemy. But Nathan was different somehow. He had risked everything to speak up for her people, and that meant something, even if she did not want it to. The days that followed fell into an unexpected rhythm. Nathan was too weak to travel, and Kharza found excuses not to force him out. He needed more time to heal. The bounty hunters might still be searching the area. The weather was turning cold, and he would not survive a mountain crossing in his condition. Each excuse was logical and reasonable, but underneath them, all was a truth neither of them wanted to acknowledge. She was lonely, and so was he. They talked as she cooked meals over the fire, as she checked and redressed his wound, as they sat in companionable silence watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. He told her about growing up on a farm near the eastern border, about joining the military because he believed in protecting people, about the slow disillusionment as he realized how much cruelty was done in the name of order and security. She told him less, but more than she had told anyone in years. About the wars she had fought, the friends she had lost, the way her clan had looked at her with suspicion when she questioned whether endless violence was truly the answer. About the mission that had gone wrong, the human child she had saved instead of killed, and the exile that had followed when her commander discovered her disobedience. "So we are both outcasts," Nathan said one evening as they shared a meal of roasted rabbit and wild roots. It would seem so. Kharza tore meat from the bone with her teeth, aware of how his eyes followed the movement. Your people would kill you for defending mine. My people cast me out for showing mercy to yours. Perhaps we are both fools. Or perhaps we are the only sane ones in a world gone mad. She snorted, but there was no real disagreement in the sound. They ate in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them before Nathan spoke again. "Why did you save that child?" She was crying, terrified, no older than 5 or 6 summers. Kharza stared into the flames, remembering. "My commander said she would grow up to be an enemy, that mercy now would mean more orc deaths later. But when I looked at her, all I saw was a child who wanted her mother. What did you do?" "I let her run. Told my commander she had been killed in the initial assault." She flexed her hands, remembering the weight of that decision. "He did not believe me. He never said so directly, but I saw the doubt in his eyes. When the exile order came months later, I was almost relieved. I was tired of pretending to be something I was not." "And what were you pretending to be?" "A monster." She looked at him directly, letting him see the weariness in her expression. "It is what your people call us, what my people sometimes embrace as a source of pride, but I have never wanted to be a monster, Nathan. I only wanted to survive." He reached across the space between them, his hand moving slowly enough that she could pull away if she chose. Instead, she let his fingers rest on top of hers, warm and smaller than her own but steady. The touch sent an unexpected jolt through her system, part alarm and part something else entirely. "You are no monster," he said quietly. "You are the furthest thing from it." She pulled her hand away, discomforted by how much she had wanted to keep it there. "You do not know me well enough to make that judgment. I know you saved my life when you had every reason to let me die. I know you have sat beside me for days nursing me back to health. I know you question violence even though you are skilled at it." He smiled slightly. "I think I know enough." Kharza stood abruptly, needing distance. "You should sleep. Your wound is healing, but you still need rest." He did not argue, perhaps sensing that he had pushed too far too fast. But as she lay in her own bedroll on the opposite side of the fire, staring up at the stars visible through the forest canopy, she could not stop thinking about the warmth of his hand on hers, or the sincerity in his voice when he called her anything but a monster. 2 weeks passed, then 3. Nathan grew stronger each day, until he was able to walk around the camp without assistance and even help with basic tasks. He was careful not to overstep, aware that he was a guest in her space, but their interactions grew easier and more natural as the days progressed. They gathered firewood together, checked hunting snares, and prepared meals side by side. It was during one of these ordinary moments that everything changed. They were by the stream that ran near camp, filling water skins and washing cooking pots, when Nathan slipped on a wet rock and reached out instinctively to catch himself. His hand landed on Kharza's forearm, and she flinched violently away from the touch, her entire body going rigid. "I am sorry," he said immediately, holding up his hands to show he meant no threat. "I did not mean to grab you." But it was not his touch that had caused her reaction. It was where he had touched. His fingers had brushed against the network of scars that covered her left forearm, thick and raised and deliberately inflicted. Punishment scars from her clan, marking her as an exile and a disgrace. "It is nothing," she said, but her voice was too tight, too defensive. "Kharza." He spoke her name gently, the way someone might speak to a frightened animal. "What happened to your arm? I told you I was exiled. Those scars are not from battle. No." She turned away, focusing on the water skins with unnecessary intensity. "They are not." She expected him to press, to demand answers the way soldiers always demanded explanations. Instead, he simply said, "I am sorry," and returned to his task of washing the pots. The subject was dropped, but she could feel his eyes on her throughout the rest of the day, filled with a concern that made her chest feel strangely tight. That night, she woke to find him sitting by the fire, unable to sleep. She should have stayed in her bedroll and pretended not to notice, but something drew her to sit beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Cannot sleep?" she asked, thinking too much. He glanced at her. "You know that feeling?" "I do." She fed another stick into the fire, watching the flames consume it. "What are you thinking about?" "About what happens when I leave here. About whether there is anywhere safe for me to go." He paused. "About whether I want to leave at all." Her heart did something complicated in her chest. "You cannot stay here forever, Nathan." "I know." He was quiet for a moment. "But I wish I could." They sat in silence, the weight of unspoken feelings heavy between them. Kharza knew she should send him away, should protect herself from the attachment that was forming despite her best efforts. But when he finally spoke again, his voice was so gentle that her defenses crumbled. "Will you tell me about the scars? You do not have to, but I want to understand." She should have refused, should have told him it was none of his concern. Instead, she found herself rolling up her sleeve to expose the full extent of the damage. The scars formed a pattern, deliberate and methodical, the marks of ritual punishment. When an orc is exiled, they are marked so that any clan will know what they are. A traitor. Weak. Unworthy of the name warrior. Her voice was flat, emotionless, the way she had learned to speak about it. 3 cuts for each year of service I owed. 15 cuts total. Nathan was silent for a long moment, staring at the scars with an expression she could not read. Then slowly and carefully he reached out and traced one of the marks with his fingertip. She tensed but did not pull away, shocked by her own stillness. "Who did this to you?" he asked. "My commander." "My former friends, the clan elders." She paused. "I did not resist." It was the price of exile over execution. They gave you a choice between death and mutilation. It is our way. It is barbaric." There was anger in his voice now, fierce and protective. "You saved a child's life. You should have been honored, not punished. The child was human. Her life had no value to them. Then they are fools who cannot recognize honor when it stands before them." His fingers were still tracing the scars, gentle and reverent. "These marks do not make you weak, Kharza. They make you braver than anyone I have ever met." Something broke inside her at those words. Some wall she had built to protect herself from caring too much. A sound escaped her throat, halfway between a laugh and a sob, and suddenly Nathan's arms were around her, and she was letting him hold her even though no one had held her in years, even though she should push him away and maintain distance. "No one touches the scars," she said against his shoulder, her voice muffled. "No one has ever been allowed that close. I am honored that you let me." His hand moved up to cup the back of her head, fingers tangling in her dark hair. "I am honored to know you at all." They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped together by the fire while the night grew cold around them. When they finally pulled apart, something fundamental had shifted between them. Kharza could see it in the way Nathan looked at her, the way his hand lingered on her arm before falling away. She could feel it in her own chest, the terrifying and exhilarating realization that she had fallen for this human man, this gentle soul who saw past her strength and her scars to something worth protecting. But knowing it and accepting it were two different things, and the days that followed were filled with a tension that had nothing to do with danger and everything to do with wanting. They moved around each other carefully, touching more often than necessary, finding excuses to sit close or work together. Nathan's wound had healed enough that he could have left, but neither of them mentioned it. It was Kharza who finally broke the silence on a cool morning when frost decorated the edges of the stream, and their breath formed clouds in the air. They were preparing breakfast together, working in the easy coordination they had developed, when she set down her knife and turned to face him. "You should go," she said, forcing the words out. "Winter is coming and you need to find shelter before the snows." Nathan stopped what he was doing and met her eyes. "Is that what you want? It is what makes sense. That is not what I asked." He moved closer, close enough that she could feel the heat of him. "Do you want me to leave, Kharza?" She should say yes, should protect them both from the inevitable pain of this impossible attachment. But when she opened her mouth, different words came out. "No, I do not want you to go." But wanting and wisdom are not the same thing. Why is it unwise? Because you are human and I am orc. Because your people hunt you and mine have cast me out. Because whatever this is between us has no future. She gestured between them, frustrated by the truth of it. "You will want to return to human lands eventually, to find others of your kind to build a life, and I cannot go with you." "Why not? Have you forgotten? I am the monster at the edge of civilization, the savage your people tell stories about to frighten children." She forced herself to meet his eyes. "There is no place in your world for someone like me." Nathan was quiet for a moment, and then he did something she did not expect. He laughed, short and sharp and almost bitter. "My world. Kharza, my world declared me a traitor and sentenced me to death for telling the truth. I have no world to return to." He reached up and cupped her face in both hands, his touch warm and steady. "The only place I want to be is wherever you are. You do not know what you are saying." "I know exactly what I am saying." His thumbs stroked along her cheekbones, tracing the sharp angles of her face. "I have spent weeks watching you, learning who you are. You are brave and strong and kind in ways that put most humans to shame. You saved my life when you had no reason to care whether I lived or died. And somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you." The words hung in the cold air between them, impossible and perfect and terrifying. Kharza felt her breath catch, her heart hammering against her ribs. "You do not love me," she said, but the protest was weak. "You are grateful, confused. It is not the same thing. Do not tell me what I feel." There was no anger in his voice, only certainty. "I know the difference between gratitude and love. What I feel when I look at you, when I am near you, when I think about you leaving my life, that is not confusion. It is the clearest thing I have ever known." She wanted to push him away, to protect them both from the inevitable hurt. But his hands on her face felt like home, like safety, like everything she had been denying she wanted. And when she looked into his eyes, she saw the truth written there as clearly as the scars on her arm. He loved her. This human man loved her, scars and strength and savage heritage included. "I do not know how to do this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have never let anyone close enough to matter. Then we will figure it out together." He smiled, gentle and warm. "I am rather new at this myself." She made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. And then she was kissing him, her large hands coming up to frame his face as she poured years of loneliness and longing into the contact. He responded immediately, his arms wrapping around her to pull her closer despite the awkwardness of their size difference. She was taller and broader than him, all muscle and contained power, but he held her like she was precious, like she was something to be treasured rather than feared. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me," he said. "Not just today or tomorrow. Stay with me and let us build something new, something that belongs only to us. Where would we go? How would we live? I do not know yet. But we will find a way." His hand moved to cover hers, fingers interlacing. "I would rather face an uncertain future with you than a certain one without you." Kharza closed her eyes, letting herself imagine it. A life with Nathan, away from both their peoples, carving out an existence in the wilderness where no one would judge or hunt them. It would be hard, perhaps impossible, but the alternative was sending him away and returning to the crushing loneliness she had endured before he stumbled into her camp. "Yes," she said finally, opening her eyes to meet his. "Yes, I will stay with you. We will make this work." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise, brilliant and warming. He kissed her again, and this time there was joy in it, the promise of a future neither of them had dared to dream of. But the world, as always, had other plans. 3 days later, as they were packing their camp to move deeper into the mountains where they might find shelter before winter truly set in, the sound of horses and shouting echoed through the trees. Nathan went pale, his hand moving instinctively to the blade Kharza had given him. "They found me," he said. Kharza's mind raced through possibilities. They could run, but Nathan was not fast enough to outpace mounted soldiers. They could hide, but their camp was visible and the hunters would find evidence of their presence. That left only one option. "Get behind me," she ordered, moving between Nathan and the approaching sounds. "And do not interfere no matter what happens. Kharza, I cannot let you fight them alone. You can and you will. I am a warrior. You are a healer at heart." She glanced back at him, her expression fierce. "Trust me, Nathan." He wanted to argue, she could see it in his eyes, but the horses were getting closer and there was no more time. He moved behind her, blade drawn but held low, and she turned to face the riders as they burst into the clearing. There were 5 of them, wearing the colors of the border garrison and armed with swords and crossbows. They pulled up short when they saw Kharza, their expressions shifting from confident to wary. An orc warrior was not what they had expected to find. "Well," the leader said, a scarred man with cruel eyes and lieutenant's insignia on his shoulder. "This is an interesting development. We were hunting a traitor, but it seems we have found an orc as well. 2 bounties for the price of 1. The human is under my protection, Kharza said, her voice carrying the weight of command despite her exile. Leave now and I will let you keep your lives. The lieutenant laughed, and his men joined in, though their laughter sounded forced. An orc giving orders to humans. How amusing. But I am afraid we have orders of our own. The deserter Nathan Xerxes is to be brought back dead or alive, and any orc found sheltering criminals is to be eliminated. Then you will have to eliminate me. Kharza drew her blade, the steel singing as it left the scabbard. But I promise you, Lieutenant, I will not go easily. The man's expression hardened. So be it. Men, take them both. The soldiers dismounted and spread out, trying to flank her. Kharza let them come, her body settling into the combat stance that had become second nature over years of warfare. She was outnumbered, and they had the advantage of reach with their crossbows, but she had fought worse odds and survived. The first man to rush her died quickly, her blade opening his throat before he could bring his sword to bear. The second managed to get a cut across her shoulder, but she powered through the pain and drove her blade into his chest. The others pulled back, suddenly uncertain, but the lieutenant was shouting orders and they came at her again. An arrow hissed past her ear, and she felt another graze her thigh, but she kept moving, kept striking, her blade finding gaps in armor and unprotected flesh. She was vaguely aware of Nathan behind her, shouting something, but her focus was on the fight, on keeping these men away from him. The lieutenant hung back, letting his men do the fighting, and that was his first mistake. When the last of his soldiers fell, wounded or dead, Kharza turned her full attention on him. He raised his crossbow with shaking hands, but she was faster, closing the distance and knocking the weapon aside before it could fire. "Please," he said, all his cruelty evaporating into fear as her blade pressed against his throat. "I was following orders. So was I once." She pressed the blade harder, drawing blood. "Orders to kill humans without question, to see them as less than people. But I learned that following orders without examining their morality makes you no better than a weapon. Tell me, Lieutenant, if I let you live, will you report that you found Nathan Xerxes?" "I will say he died," the man gasped. "I will say the orc killed him and we barely escaped with our lives." "You will say you found no sign of him at all," Kharza corrected. "You will report that the trail went cold in these woods, and you will never hunt him again. Do you understand?" Yes, I understand. She should kill him. Every instinct told her that leaving an enemy alive was a mistake. But she was tired of death, tired of violence, tired of being the monster everyone expected. So instead, she stepped back and lowered her blade. "Go, and pray we never meet again." The lieutenant did not need to be told twice. He scrambled onto his horse and fled, leaving his dead and wounded men behind. Kharza watched him go, then turned to find Nathan staring at her with wide eyes. "You let him live," he said, sounding shocked. "Yes." She wiped her blade clean and sheathed it, wincing as the movement pulled at the wound she had taken. "I am tired of killing, Nathan. I want to find another way to live." He moved to her side immediately, his hands gentle as he examined her injuries. "You are hurt. It is not serious." But even as she said it, pain lanced through her leg and she stumbled. Nathan caught her, supporting her weight despite being smaller and lighter. "Sit down before you fall down," he ordered, and there was enough steel in his voice that she obeyed, settling onto a log near the fire pit. He pulled out the medical supplies she had used on him weeks ago and set to work cleaning and bandaging her wounds with careful efficiency. "You learned well," she said, watching his hands move with practiced confidence. "I had a good teacher." He glanced up at her and there was something fierce in his expression. "You could have died protecting me, but I did not, Kharza." He set down the bandages and took her hands in his. "I know you are a warrior. I know you are strong and skilled and perfectly capable of defending yourself. But you cannot ask me to stand aside and watch you risk your life without feeling something. I am not asking you to feel nothing. I am asking you to trust that I can handle threats." She squeezed his hands. "I have been fighting my entire life, Nathan. It is what I know." "Then let me help. We are together now. That means facing dangers together." She wanted to argue, to insist that protecting him was her responsibility, but the look in his eyes stopped her. He was not asking to be coddled or shielded. He was asking to be her partner in truth, not just in affection. "Very well," she said finally. "Together, but you need to train more if you are going to fight alongside me." A smile quirked his lips. "I suppose that means you are not getting rid of me anytime soon." "No, it seems I am stuck with you." "Good." He leaned in and kissed her, gentle and sweet despite the blood and pain and violence of the last hour. When he pulled back, his expression was serious. "We need to move. More soldiers might come." "Agreed." Kharza let him help her to her feet, testing her wounded leg. "It would hold, though it would slow her down. We go deeper into the mountains. Find somewhere remote enough that no one will follow." They broke camp quickly, gathering their supplies and erasing signs of their presence as best they could. The dead soldiers they left where they had fallen. It was harsh, but they had no time or energy to spare for burial, and the lieutenant would have to explain their absence however he chose. The journey into the high mountains was difficult, made worse by Kharza's injuries and the approaching winter. They traveled slowly, Nathan supporting her when her leg gave out, Kharza navigating by instinct and memory of maps she had studied years ago. They found shelter in caves and abandoned animal dens, huddling together for warmth as the nights grew colder. It was during one of those cold nights, pressed together under shared blankets in a shallow cave while snow fell outside, that Nathan asked the question she had been dreading. "You regret it? Choosing this life with me instead of moving on alone?" Kharza was quiet for a moment, listening to the wind howl through the mountain passes. She thought about what she had given up, the solitary existence that had been painful but safe, the certainty of self-reliance. Then she thought about what she had gained, these moments of closeness, the warmth of another body beside her, the knowledge that someone in this world cared whether she lived or died. "No," she said finally, turning to look at him in the dim light of their small fire. "I do not regret it, do you?" "Never." He kissed her forehead, his arms tightening around her. "I would choose this 1,000 times over." They found their refuge 2 weeks later, a hidden valley deep in the mountains where a warm spring kept the land temperate even as winter locked the passes around them. There was a small cabin there, abandoned for years but still structurally sound, and they claimed it as their own. It needed work, repairs to the roof and walls, but it was shelter and privacy and the promise of a home. They spent the winter making it livable, working side by side to patch holes and gather supplies. Nathan proved surprisingly handy with carpentry, and Kharza's strength made quick work of heavy lifting and repairs. They hunted together, Kharza teaching Nathan to track and move silently through the woods, Nathan teaching her the patience required for ice fishing in the frozen lake at the valley's edge. It was not an easy life, but it was theirs, built by their own hands and free from the judgment of either of their peoples. And in the quiet moments, sitting together by the fire or lying tangled in their shared bed, Kharza found something she had never expected to feel: peace. Spring came eventually, as it always did, melting the snows and opening the passes once more. They discussed leaving, finding a more permanent settlement somewhere, but neither of them felt the urgency to move on. Their valley was isolated and beautiful, and they had built a life there that felt real and solid. It was on one of the first warm days of spring, when the meadow outside their cabin was covered in wildflowers, and the air smelled of growing things, that Nathan surprised her. They were working in the garden they had planted, turning soil and preparing rows for vegetables, when he suddenly stopped and turned to her. "Kharza, I have something to ask you." She looked up from her work, noting the nervous energy in his stance. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong, He took a breath. "Among my people, when two people love each other and want to spend their lives together, they make a formal commitment, a marriage. I know it is a human custom, and I do not know if orcs do something similar, but I wanted to ask if you would be willing to marry me. To make this official in whatever way feels right to both of us." Kharza stared at him, completely caught off guard. Marriage was not an orc custom, not in the way he described. Orcs bonded through shared combat and clan ties, not romantic declarations. But the earnestness in Nathan's eyes, the vulnerability in his question, made something in her chest swell with emotion. "I do not know your marriage customs," she said carefully. "What would it mean?" "It would mean we are committing to each other, publicly declaring that we choose to face life as partners." He reached for her hands, his fingers dirty from the soil. "In human culture, there is usually a ceremony, an exchange of vows before witnesses. But we have no witnesses here, and I do not need a ceremony to know what you mean to me. I just want you to know that I choose you, today and every day forward, and I want to know if you choose me the same way." She thought about it, turning the concept over in her mind. A formal declaration of commitment, a promise to stand together against whatever came. In a way, they had already made that commitment through their actions, through the choice to build this life together. But there was something powerful in speaking it aloud, in naming what existed between them. "Yes," she said, watching his face transform with joy. "I choose you, Nathan Xerxes, today and all the days I have left. You are my partner, my home, my heart. If that is what marriage means, then yes, I will marry you." He laughed, bright and free, and pulled her into a kiss that tasted of sunshine and soil and happiness. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "We should do this properly," he said. "Make vows to each other, mark the occasion somehow. Then we will." She smiled, a real smile that showed her small tusks. "We will create our own ceremony, one that honors both our peoples." They spent the rest of the day preparing, washing away the dirt and dressing in the best clothes they had. Nathan gathered wildflowers and wove them into a crown that he placed on Kharza's head, with gentle reverence. She took her best blade and carefully cut a strip of leather from her armor, braiding it with a strip of cloth from Nathan's old uniform to create a cord that symbolized their union. As the sun began to set, painting the valley in gold and amber light, they stood together in the meadow and spoke their vows. There was no one to witness except the mountains and the sky, but it felt sacred nonetheless. "I vow to stand with you in all things," Nathan said, his hands holding hers. "To honor your strength without fearing it, to support you without diminishing you, to love you as you are and not as the world might wish you to be." Kharza felt tears prick her eyes, something she had not experienced since childhood. "I vow to protect you without smothering you, to trust you as my equal, to build with you rather than for you. I vow to let you close, to share my scars and my strengths, to be vulnerable when vulnerability is needed." They tied the braided cord around their joined hands, the leather and cloth binding them together literally and symbolically. Then they kissed as husband and wife, or as close to it as they could claim, and the last rays of sunlight blessed their union with golden warmth. That night they lay together in their bed, the window open to let in the spring breeze, and talked about the future they would build. Children, perhaps, though they did not know if their union could produce them. A larger home if their family grew. Possibly reaching out to other outcasts and exiles, building a community of those who did not fit in either human or orc society. "You think there are others like us?" Nathan asked, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her arm. "People who see past the divisions and just want peace." "I think there must be," Kharza said. "The world is large, we cannot be the only ones. Maybe someday we will find them, or they will find us. Maybe." She pulled him closer, content in the moment. "But for now, this is enough. You are enough." "So are you," he whispered against her skin. "More than enough. Everything." Summer arrived with long, warm days perfect for expanding their homestead. They built a barn for the goats they had acquired from a traveling trader who did not ask questions, planted a larger garden, and even started work on a second building that might serve as storage or guest quarters if they ever had guests. It was during one of these projects, while Nathan was on the roof hammering new shingles and Kharza was mixing mortar below, that they heard someone approaching through the forest. They both froze, hands moving to weapons that were never far from reach, and waited to see who or what would emerge from the trees. What emerged was an orc woman, younger than Kharza by perhaps a decade, with fresh exile scars on her arms and a human child clinging to her hand. The woman stopped at the edge of the clearing, taking in the scene with wary eyes. "I was told there might be sanctuary here," she said in the orcish tongue, "for those who no longer fit in the clans." Kharza exchanged a glance with Nathan, who had climbed down from the roof and now stood beside her. They had never advertised their location or extended invitations, but somehow word had spread. Perhaps the trader had talked, or perhaps it was simply inevitable that outcasts would find each other. "Who told you this?" Kharza asked, also in Orcish. "Another exile, 3 valleys west. She said an orc warrior lived here with a human, building a life free from judgment." The woman's grip on the child's hand tightened. "I saved this boy from raiders. My clan cast me out for it. I have nowhere else to go." Kharza looked at the child, who could not have been more than 7, and saw her own past reflected in the woman's choice. She had saved a human child and lost everything. Now history was repeating itself, but this time there was somewhere for the exile to turn. "What is your name?" Kharza asked, switching to the common tongue so Nathan could understand. "Varska. This is Torin." The woman pushed the boy forward slightly. "I will work for our keep. I am strong and willing. I just need a safe place for him to grow." Nathan was already nodding, his soft heart making the decision before Kharza could weigh all the implications. But when she met his eyes, she found herself nodding too. This was who they were now, a refuge for those caught between worlds, and there was rightness in that. "You may stay," Kharza said. "We have room and there is always work to be done. But you should know this is not a place of warriors. We have left that life behind. Here we build rather than destroy." Varska's eyes filled with tears and she dropped to one knee in a gesture of respect. "Thank you. I will honor your sanctuary with my service." "Stand up," Kharza said, uncomfortable with the deference. "We do not do that here. We are equals, united by our choices rather than clan law." The younger orc stood slowly, still looking uncertain but hopeful. Nathan stepped forward and offered his hand to Torin, who took it after a moment's hesitation. "Are you hungry?" Nathan asked the boy. "We were about to have lunch. Do you like goat cheese?" Torin nodded shyly, and just like that their family began to grow. Varska and Torin settled into the valley quickly, taking over the second building they had been constructing and throwing themselves into the work of the homestead. The boy was quiet but observant, following Nathan around like a shadow and absorbing everything he was taught. Varska proved to be an excellent hunter and tracker, and she and Kharza fell into an easy partnership during their expeditions into the woods. It was during one of these hunts, after they had brought down a deer and were field dressing it, that Varska asked the question Kharza had been expecting. "How did you do it?" "Learn to live with a human not as a hostage or temporary ally, but as an equal." Kharza thought about all the small moments that had built their relationship, the choices they had made to trust and be vulnerable with each other. "I stopped seeing him as human first and saw him as Nathan, a person with his own fears and hopes and scars, and he did the same for me. But the differences, the size, the strength, the way we are raised to think of humans as fragile or inferior. Nathan is not fragile where it matters. His body may be smaller and less durable, but his spirit is stronger than many orc warriors I have known. He faces his fears instead of running from them. He questions injustice even when it costs him everything." Kharza paused in her work. "Strength is not only measured in muscle and battle prowess." Varska nodded slowly. "I am trying to see it. Torin has shown me things I did not expect. His capacity for forgiveness, his joy despite the horrors he has witnessed. But I still feel like I am failing him, like I do not know how to raise a human child." "None of us know what we are doing," Kharza admitted. "Nathan and I are making this up as we go along, but we have each other, and now you and Torin have us. We will figure it out together." They hauled the deer back to the homestead, where Nathan and Torin were working on repairing a fence. The boy looked up as they approached, his face lighting up when he saw Varska. The orc woman's expression softened in a way that Kharza recognized. Love, fierce and protective and new. That night, after a communal dinner where they all sat around the table and shared food and stories, Kharza and Nathan lay in bed and talked about the future they were building. "We are creating something new here," Nathan said. "A place where the old divisions do not matter. Where children can grow up seeing past the hatred their parents were taught." "It is a fragile thing," Kharza cautioned. "One group of soldiers could destroy everything we have built. Then we will be careful, and if we must fight to protect this place, we will." He turned to look at her. "But I think most people just want to live in peace, Kharza. Human and orc alike. Maybe if we prove it is possible, others will follow." She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust in the goodness of people despite everything she had experienced. But looking at him, at the absolute conviction in his eyes, she found that she did believe. Not because the world had suddenly become kind, but because he made her want to fight for something better. "Then we will be an example," she said, "and hope it is enough." More came, slowly at first and then in a steady trickle. Another exile, a human woman who had married an orc and been cast out by her family. A half-orc teen, rejected by both communities for his mixed heritage. A deserter from the human military who could no longer stomach the violence. An elderly orc couple seeking peace in their final years. The valley settlement grew, and with it came challenges. Resources had to be carefully managed. Disputes had to be mediated. Defenses had to be organized in case their location was discovered by hostile forces. But through it all, the core principle held. Everyone was equal, everyone contributed, and the past did not matter as much as the present and future. Kharza found herself taking on a leadership role she had never sought, becoming the de facto authority for the community because of her experience and the respect others showed her. Nathan worked beside her, tempering her warrior's instincts with diplomacy and compassion. Together, they guided their unlikely community through its first year, then its second, watching it grow from a handful of refugees to a thriving settlement of nearly 50 souls. It was during the third year, on a spring morning very much like the one when Nathan had proposed, that Kharza realized something that made her stop in the middle of the garden. Nathan noticed immediately, setting down his hoe and coming to her side. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong." She placed a hand on her abdomen, feeling the subtle swell that she had been ignoring for weeks, telling herself it was simply weight gain from the settled life. "I think I am with child." Nathan's eyes went wide, and then he was laughing and crying at the same time, pulling her into an embrace that lifted her off her feet despite the absurdity of him trying to lift someone so much larger. "Are you certain?" he asked when he set her down. "No. But I know my body and something has changed." She felt a flutter of fear mixed with joy. "I did not think it was possible. Humans and orcs do not typically produce children together." "But we are not typical," Nathan said, his hands moving to cup her face. "Nothing about us has ever been typical." "Why should this be any different?" She kissed him, letting herself believe in the possibility, in the hope that their love had created something new and precious. Over the following weeks, her pregnancy became undeniable, her body changing in ways that confirmed what her instincts had told her. The community rallied around them with support and excitement. Varska appointed herself Kharza's personal guard, insisting on accompanying her everywhere despite Kharza's protests that she was pregnant, not helpless. Nathan fussed over her health, making sure she rested and ate properly and did not overexert herself. Even young Torin, now nearly 10, took on extra chores without being asked so that Kharza could take it easier. But the pregnancy was not easy. Kharza's body, built for warfare and hardship, struggled with the demands of growing a child. She was sick often in the early months, weak in the later ones, and constantly afraid that something would go wrong. Nathan never left her side more than necessary, his presence a constant source of comfort and strength. "What if the child is rejected by both our peoples?" she asked one night, her hands resting on her swollen belly. "What if they are alone in the world? They will never be alone. They have us, and they have this community. And if they face rejection, we will teach them to be strong enough to rise above it." Nathan's hand covered hers. "Our child will be a bridge between worlds, Kharza, living proof that love is stronger than hate." That is a heavy burden to place on a child. Then we will make sure they are strong enough to carry it, together. The birth came in the heart of winter, during a blizzard that kept everyone inside and made the world feel small and intimate. Kharza labored for hours, attended by Varska and an elderly human woman who had been a midwife in her former life. Nathan held her hand through all of it, letting her squeeze hard enough to bruise, whispering encouragement and love. When their daughter finally came into the world, howling with fury at the cold air, Kharza felt something shift fundamentally in her understanding of herself. This tiny being, green-skinned like her mother but with her father's delicate features and bright eyes, was everything. More important than survival, than honor, than anything she had ever fought for. "She is perfect," Nathan said, tears streaming down his face as he held their daughter for the first time. "Look at her, Kharza. She is absolutely perfect." Kharza reached out with trembling hands to touch the baby's cheek, marveling at the softness of her skin. "What should we name her?" They had discussed names during the pregnancy, debating between human and orc traditions, but now that their daughter was here, Nathan seemed to already know. "Mira," he said softly. "It means peace in the old language, and she is our peace, the proof that all of this was worth it." "Mira," Kharza repeated, tasting the name. "Yes, that is right." The community celebrated the birth with a feast that lasted 3 days, everyone contributing food and gifts for the new family. Mira was passed from person to person, cooed over and adored by humans and orcs alike. She represented hope for all of them, the promise that the next generation would not have to carry the same divisions and hatred. As the years passed, Mira grew strong and curious, learning to walk and talk and explore their valley home with fearless enthusiasm. She was taught both human and orc traditions, spoke both languages fluently, and moved between the two cultures with an ease that Kharza envied. Other children were born in the community, some fully human, some fully orc, and a few like Mira who bridged the gap. They played together without seeing difference, their laughter echoing through the valley and giving the adults hope for a better future. Kharza watched it all with a sense of amazement that never quite faded. She had gone from an exiled warrior with nothing but scars and regrets to the co-founder of a thriving community, a wife, and a mother. The scars on her arm had not disappeared, but their meaning had changed. They were no longer marks of shame, but reminders of the price she had paid for the courage to choose her own path. On the 5th anniversary of their arrival in the valley, the community threw a celebration. There was music and dancing, food and drink, and stories shared around a massive bonfire. Kharza stood at the edge of the gathering, watching Nathan dance with Mira while Torin played a fiddle and Varska clapped along to the rhythm. "You have built something remarkable here," a voice said beside her, and she turned to find the elderly orc man who had arrived 2 years ago. His name was Grakuk, and he had been a clan elder before his disagreement with their war policies led to his exile. "We built it together," Kharza corrected. "All of us. But it started with you and Nathan, with your willingness to trust across the divide." Grakuk smiled, his tusks yellowed with age. "I never thought I would see such a thing in my lifetime. Humans and orcs living as neighbors, as family. It gives me hope that peace might be possible on a larger scale. Perhaps." Kharza was less optimistic about the wider world, but she did not want to dampen the old orc's hope. "For now, this valley is enough." Nathan emerged from the dancing crowd, Mira riding on his shoulders and giggling wildly. He made his way to Kharza's side, slightly out of breath but grinning widely. "Your daughter is demanding that you dance," he said. "I do not dance." "Mama, please." Mira's small voice was impossible to resist. Kharza sighed dramatically, but allowed Nathan to pull her toward the fire, where the music had shifted to something slower and more romantic. He took her hands and they swayed together, their movement more of an embrace than true dancing. Mira had been transferred to Varska's care, and was now spinning in dizzying circles with the other children. "Happy?" Nathan asked, his voice soft enough that only she could hear. Kharza looked around at the community they had built, at the people who had found sanctuary in their valley. She thought about how far she had come from the scarred, lonely warrior who had saved a dying human out of some impulse she could not name. She thought about the life growing inside their home, the love that had transformed them both. "Yes," she said, and meant it completely. "I am happy." He pulled her closer, resting his head against her chest, and they danced in the firelight while their daughter laughed, and their community celebrated around them. The scars on Kharza's arm caught the flickering light, no longer marks of shame but badges of survival. Proof that she had been strong enough to endure punishment and brave enough to choose a different path. No one had ever been allowed close enough to touch those scars before Nathan. Now they were part of the story she shared with Mira, teaching their daughter that true strength came from the courage to be vulnerable, to let people in despite the risk of pain. As the celebration wound down and people began drifting toward their homes, Nathan and Kharza walked hand in hand back to their cabin, Mira sleeping soundly in her father's arms. They tucked her into bed, kissing her forehead and marveling as they did every night at the miracle of her existence. In their own bed, wrapped around each other in the darkness, Nathan whispered the words he said every night before sleep claimed them. "I love you." "I love you too," Kharza replied, as she always did, and let herself sink into the peace of being known completely, scars and all, by someone who had chosen to stay. Outside, the valley slept under a blanket of stars, its inhabitants safe and warm and building toward a future where old hatreds might finally fade. It was a small thing in the scope of the wider world, a pocket of peace in a land still torn by conflict, but it was real and it was theirs, and it was enough. More than enough. Everything. The years continued to unfold with the natural rhythm of seasons and growth. Mira became a bright, confident child who moved between human and orc communities with diplomatic grace that neither of her parents possessed. She had inherited Kharza's strength and Nathan's empathy, creating a combination that made her a natural leader among the settlement's children. When Mira was 7, Kharza began teaching her the warrior forms, not because she wanted her daughter to be a fighter, but because she wanted her to know how to protect herself and others. Nathan taught her to read and write in multiple languages, to tend wounds and illness, to see the value in healing as well as strength. Between them, they raised a daughter who understood both the necessity of strength and the importance of compassion. The settlement continued to grow, attracting more refugees and exiles. They built additional structures, expanded their farmland, and established trade relationships with a few brave merchants who did not care about the mixed nature of their community. It was never easy, and there were close calls when military patrols came too near or when old prejudices flared within the community itself. But they weathered each challenge together. Kharza and Nathan's relationship deepened with time, the passion of their early days maturing into a partnership built on absolute trust and understanding. They had their disagreements, moments when their different backgrounds led to different perspectives, but they had learned to navigate those differences with patience and humor. On their 10th anniversary in the valley, they stood together at the highest point overlooking their home, watching the sun set over the settlement that sprawled below. It was larger than either of them had imagined it could become, a real village now with its own identity and culture. "Do you ever regret it?" Kharza asked, echoing the question Nathan had asked her so many years ago. "Giving up your old life for this?" Nathan laughed softly. "I gave up a life of running and fear for this. That is not a sacrifice, Kharza. That is a gift." He squeezed her hand. "Every day with you has been a gift." She leaned down to kiss him, still amazed after all these years that this gentle human man had seen past her scars to the person underneath. That he had loved her not despite her strength, but because of it, while also treasuring the vulnerability she shared only with him. Below them, Mira was playing with a group of children, her laughter carrying on the evening breeze. Varska was teaching a weapons class to some of the older teens. The elderly couple who ran the communal kitchen were preparing dinner. Everywhere Kharza looked, she saw life and hope and possibility. "We did this," she said quietly. "We built something that will outlast us." "Yes," Nathan agreed, "but the best part is not what we built. It is who we became in the building of it." Kharza understood what he meant. She was no longer the bitter, scarred warrior who had saved him that night in the forest. She had become someone who could accept love, who could build rather than destroy, who could imagine a future beyond mere survival. And Nathan had become more than the frightened fugitive stumbling into her camp. He had become a leader, a father, a man who proved every day that courage came in many forms. They stood together as darkness fell and lights began to appear in the windows below, each one representing a life that had found safety within their valley. It was not perfect, would never be perfect, but it was real and it was theirs, and it was the testament to what love could build when given the chance to grow. Kharza touched the scars on her arm, the marks that had once represented her exile and shame. Nathan's hand covered hers, warm and steady as always, and she realized that these scars had been the beginning of everything. Without them, she might never have understood the cost of choosing compassion over cruelty. Without the pain they represented, she might never have appreciated the healing that Nathan brought into her life. "Thank you," she said suddenly. "For what? For seeing me. For staying. For building this life with me when you could have walked away 100 times." Nathan pulled her into an embrace, his arms wrapping around her waist as she bent to rest her forehead against his. "I could never have walked away from you, Kharza. From the moment you let me touch your scars, from the moment you trusted me with your pain, I was yours, completely and forever." They stayed that way as night fully claimed the valley. Two people from different worlds who had found a way to create something new together. Around them, their community settled into evening routines, secure in the knowledge that tomorrow would come and they would face it together, as they always had. And in that moment, standing on the mountain with the man she loved and the life they had built spread out before them, Kharza finally understood what it meant to be home. Not a place or a people, but this feeling of belonging completely to someone who belonged completely to you in return. She had been a warrior, an exile, a survivor. Now she was simply Kharza, wife to Nathan, mother to Mira, co-founder of a community that proved love was stronger than hate. And that was enough. That was everything. The wind carried the sounds of evening up to them, children being called in for dinner, conversations and laughter, the ordinary beautiful noise of life being lived without fear. Nathan tightened his arms around her, and Kharza felt the last of her old scars, the invisible ones that lived in her heart, finally begin to fade. She had let him close enough to touch her scars, and in doing so, she had learned to heal. That was the greatest gift of all.